Today I am going to be taking you through a workshop on the signature rolling transitions in the Budokan primary series, and you'll find that all these transitions will reoccur throughout all 7 sections of the primary series. We are predominantly going to focus on how you enter into shapes as well as how you transition out of them. So in Budokan, the way we do anything is the way that we do everything, paying attention to the details and really focusing on how you enter a shape as well as how you exit the shape. It's absolutely vital in order to execute and to flow through our practice in a really, you can really embody the practice and execute the shapes really well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the movements first so that you can visually see it in practice, and then I'm just going to break it down in terms of technique and what you are meant to be engaging in your body, and really just break down the movements so that you can see for yourself how to do them. Okay, so beginning in a 4-point base, this is the foundation to the practice. You really want to focus on engaging the correct musculature in order to have set the foundation, because what's really important is having a good, solid, strong foundation, and then from there you can build. Okay, so we're going to start in a 4-point base. Alright, so your right palm is going to come to the ground as well as the left. From here, we're going to start to really grapple with the ground with the fingertips. So you want to have the fingertips nice and wide based on the ground, and you want to have your shoulders aligned over the wrists, okay, wrists underneath the shoulders, and then you want to actually curl the toes underneath, setting it up for a nice solid foundation. In Budokan, it's all about transitioning in and out of the shapes. We are different from that of a traditional yoga practice in the sense that we don't focus on holding or pausing static shapes. It's more about flowing into and out of them, kind of like a martial artist. Okay, so if you think about in terms of martial arts, how you can move and flow from the fixed and the fluid, and moving in a more athletic, dynamic, multi-dimensional way, as opposed to holding shapes and then just moving sort of like awkwardly in between shape to shape. Our first really important signature transition is the cobra hood. Is the most essential method to tap into your pressing strength. So throughout the practice, there's going to be points where you need to really press into the shoulders, into your shoulder. This is called your shoulder girdle. So in cobra hood is something you really want to master and practice so that you can really develop that feeling of pressing into the shoulders and trusting the shoulders, and to get you that power to press. So we can do shapes like crane and crow and handstand and any other arm balancing shapes. To find the cobra hood, you would start in a 4-point base, and what you really want to do is press into the sevens of your hands. Okay, so it'll be like your pointing finger and your thumb, and make a little seven and wide fingers like a spider, and really press into the mat with those hands. Okay, so to find the cobra hood, you want to turn the elbows in. The little crease here on the inside of the elbow is pointing towards the front. Okay, and then once you have that positioning, it's almost like you want to press away from the mat so that you create a little hunch almost in the thoracic part, so the upper part of your back. You want to press so that your shoulders are protracting. Okay, so when we're pressing away from the ground, that is when we're creating a little protraction in the shoulder girdle. So if you were to reverse that, just so you can get more of a sense of what's happening here, you would press into the shoulder girdle, and then here we find our cobra hood. You make sure that you are drawing the navel to the spine, okay? And then that's how we're going to engage engage our abdominals slightly, but you want to keep the lumbar part of your spine neutral. Okay, so we don't want, so not like cat and cow where we are completely rounding. All I want to see from you is that you are pressing away from the ground and contracting just the shoulders and really hugging in the navel towards the spine and keeping the lumbar region of the spine in a neutral position. And then that is where you're going to find your cobra hood. From this cobra hood, we can add onto that pressing action. We would maintain the integrity of this position, and we could step back into plank and still maintain that beautiful cobra hood position where we're protracting the shoulders. Okay, and then to fire into the cobra hood, you really, really need to focus on drawing the navel to the spine to really maintain a full activation in the body, in the front line of the body. And then in your plank, you would want to make sure that you're squeezing the glutes and squeezing your quads and drawing the hips sort of down towards the wrists in a way. Okay. And then from this cobra hood, you can really get that pressing action and build up the strength in your shoulders. Another really important signature Budokan transition, which is our rolling wave. Throughout the Budokan primary series, you're going to be using this transition. So it's something that you really want to work on, you want to feel in your body. In Budokan, we work a lot on the fixed and the fluid. This would be your key to working through the fluidity from shape to shape. Okay. What is great about our rolling transitions and what makes our rolling vinyasas different from that of the traditional yogic practice is that we don't, for example, if we're in a downward facing dog, in a traditional yogic practice, often if they do a rolling vinyasa, they would start in a downward dog, and they go straight from downward dog to plank to chaturanga, and then to push up through chaturanga, and then straight back into a downward facing dog. That is, there's nothing wrong with that, but in Budokan, as I said, we focus on how we transition from shape to shape so that we can try and integrate the entire body into the movement. So you really want to work with the body as one kinetic chain. Basically, creating an awareness within the pelvis and drawing it in towards the navel, drawing the navel to the spine, and then really working away from the lumbar spine to the thoracic through to the cervical, and then reversing that. So we create like a kinetic chain in the body, a wave-like motion. The rolling wave, this is how it looks. We're going to begin in a downward facing dog. Okay. Section 1 is where we would have our first rolling wave. The rolling wave also requires a little bit less strength than our rolling vinyasa, which I'm going to demonstrate next. It's more about finding a connection between your lower body and then connecting that all the way through to basically from your toes to your head, and then reversing that back from the head to the toes. You rise onto the balls of the feet, high up onto the balls of the feet. I'm finding a nice elevation in the shoulders. Okay, so bringing the shoulder blades up towards the ears, finding a nice height on the toes. I am drawing my knees up, so really engaging the quads here. And when I lift up, it's like someone is pulling my hips up towards the sky. Okay? Then to find our wave, to initiate the wave, we want to draw the pelvis, so your hip bones, you're going to draw them in towards the navel. The navel's going to come towards the spine, and then we're going to sort of close the gap between the hips and the rib cage. And what we would call this, so if we're in downward facing dog, this is called an anterior pelvic tilt. So if I was to show you the difference between an anterior pelvic tilt and a posterior pelvic tilt, we're in downward facing dog, slight anterior pelvic tilt. You're going to find now to initiate the wave a posterior pelvic tilt, which means as we rise onto the balls of the feet, I'm in my anterior pelvic tilt, someone's pulling with the rope, pulling my hips up towards the sky. I'm drawing the pelvis in towards the ribcage, navel to spine, and I'm finding a little tuck towards the ribcage, and that would be my posterior pelvic tilt. If I was to show you in a 4-point base, here I'm at, we're going to find our little cobra hood, so we're pressing away from the ground, contracting the shoulder blades, slide round in the thoracic, and then I've got right now a neutral spine, lumbar spine at the moment. So if we were to look at cat and cow, so if I was to go into cow, you would see here, now I have an anterior pelvic tilt. My pelvis is, it's like someone is pulling from the tailbone, pulling up. Okay, so that's an anterior pelvic tilt. If it was to posterior pelvic tilt, I would be drawing the hips and the pelvis in towards the rib cage, and now I'm posterior tilting. Same as if I was standing. Okay, so right now I'm standing. I'm on my knees. Okay, I'm standing neutral. If I was to press my pelvis out and back, you'll see there's like an arch here in my back. That's an anterior pelvic tilt. And now if I was to hug, I was really wanting to activate the front line of my body. I would then start to draw the navel to the spine. I would then draw the pelvis in to meet the rib cage. I would be squeezing my glutes and then hugging the hips in. Okay, so if I was in my contraction, my cobra hood, I'd be pressing and really hugging everything in like a little ball. And that's what we're going to be doing in the rolling way. So if I'm downward dog, just imagine like a big wave in your body. Okay, so you're going to rise into the balls of the feet. You're going to draw the pelvis in to the rib cage. Navel draws to the spine. Now we're going to press into that cobra hood. So we're contracting the shoulder blade, pressing strong into the ground. Okay, with the fingertips, fire into your cobra hood. So drawing the navel to the spine. You're going to tuck the chin towards the chest. Okay? And you're going to roll through where your shoulders are going to come to the come past the fingertips. Okay? Go past the fingertips, hugging everything in. And then we're going to melt the hips. So we're going to stay in that contraction. Yeah, we really want to stay pressing away from the ground, pressing into your pelvis. We're going to melt the hips towards the wrists. My shoulders are actually just past my fingertips. Close to the chest. Our toes are curled under in our rolling wave. And once we get here, we're drawing the hips towards the wrists. Okay? We're going to be hovering off the ground. We're going to lift our chin up to neutral. And then now we are going to round the shoulders back. So you really want to depress the shoulders. And with a slight retraction, opening up the chest into a floating upward facing dog. Okay, so that is the first part of the wave. What's really important in this transition and this container that we're working from is that when you get here, you're tucking the chest, you're tucking the chin in towards the chest. You're shifting the shoulders past the wrists, past the fingertips. Your gaze is still tucking the chin towards the chest. You're slowly bringing your hips down, active through the quadriceps, hover off the ground. The shoulders here, when you come into a floating upward dog, are now rounded because you were in a protraction. You were in cobra hood. So what I want you to focus on when you get to that floating upward dog is to really have a nice opening across the chest, which means if you're like protracting like this, when you come to the floating upward dog, you want to roll the shoulders back so that you find a slight retraction, and then you want to move the shoulders away from the ears, so drawing them down, depressing the shoulders because they're going to be elevated like this and you're going to be pushing, so you want to roll them back and bring the shoulders down so that you have a nice opening in the chest and you're floating upward dog. Okay, so one more time, up into the balls of the feet, finding that posterior tilt, bring the pelvis into the rib cage, drawing the navel to the spine, rolling the feet, shoulders past the wrist, past the fingertips, drawing the hips towards the wrist, towards the ground, depress the shoulders, slight retraction, press up and out, so we're nice and tall, neck is neutral, opening up through the chest. You really want to push your chest out forward and keep the gaze neutral in front of you. To reverse this, okay, we will be in our floating upward dog. You're going to draw the chin towards the chest. You're now going to fire into your cobra bit again. So we're going to press away from the ground, finding this nice rounding through the thoracic and the cervical spine, tucking it in, pressing into the shoulders all the way, looking, almost looking to your toes. You're going to activate the quadriceps. You're going to keep pressing. Navel draws to the spine, pushing away from the ground like a wave, through to the thoracic, to the lumbar, and then onto the balls of your feet, and all the way through, back to where we came from, where someone is pulling you with the rope, pulling your hips up towards the sky, and then you're going to find, lower the heels to the ground, rooting them into your downward facing dog. That is a signature transition that you will find throughout the practice, particularly in section 1, where it's all about, really working on the spinal movements and really finding a fluidity in the body. It's something that it's really good to integrate the front line of the body as well as the back line, and getting you to just see your body as one big wave from shape to shape. We're going to talk a little bit about our rolling vinyasa. So this would be like a step up from the rolling wave. So once you've got the hang of the rolling wave, rolling forward as well as rolling backwards, you can take this up a step. That would be the transition we mainly use in section 1. And then in section 2, in the Archer series, the Divided Mind, we take it up a level where we do our rolling vinyasa. How it works is, instead of lowering the hips and coming up into your floating up dog, it involves a chaturanga. So you would roll through your wave, but this time you lift the gaze, you shift the shoulders past the fingertips, and you lower slowly down through a chaturanga into prone. And then so chaturanga is basically like a really slow or negative, narrow or tricep push-up. So you will need a little bit more upper body strength for this. I'm going to offer a regression, so if you are lacking that upper body strength, don't stress. It just means we need to work a little bit more through like push-ups, some calisthenics work, just for you to build up that strength. But there is a regression which I'm going to demonstrate to you now. Okay, if we start in downward dog, you would come up onto the balls of the feet, nice and high, like a rope, pulling your your tailbone up towards the sky. We are pulling the knees up, which is activating our quadriceps. Now I'm going to find a little tuck by drawing the pelvis in towards the rib cage, navel draws towards the spine, rounding through, tucking the chin, rounding through, firing into a cobra hood, activating the front line of the body. So when we get here, instead of melting or drawing the hips down towards the wrist, you're going to stay in this strong finding a high plank position. Okay, you're gonna lift that chin slightly and maybe gaze forward, because we always look to where we're going in our Budokan practice, to look where you're going, and we're going to shift forward so that your shoulders come past the fingertips. What you want to do here is depress the shoulders, so draw the shoulders away from the ears, keep drawing the navel to the spine, shifting past the fingertips, and now you want to hug the elbows in towards the rib cage, and you want to lower slowly, with control, down through a negative push-up or chaturanga, all the way down into prone, so onto your belly. If you are struggling with upper body strength, what you want to do then is you can always bring your knees to the ground. So when you get here, we're coming forward through our rolling wave. Okay, you get here, but this part, you start to notice that if you do lower down, you are arching your back, your spine, or maybe you're just collapsing, or your bum is going up, or you're going down like this. Whatever, you just notice that your form is going crazy, and that's a sign that you need to regress. Okay, that's perfectly fine. And perhaps working on some push-ups to build that strength. What you're going to do is, so when you get to the plank, so you roll through your wave, you come to plank. All you're going to do is drop the knees down. You're going to maintain your cobra hood, so your protraction in the shoulder blades. I want you to lift the gaze, depress the shoulders, so draw the shoulders away from the ears. And then we're going to shift forward, slightly past the fingertips, and then from here, keeping the navel to the spine, bum stays down or your hips stay rooted, drawing the elbows to the rib cage, lowering down to chaturanga into prone. And it's really nice to make that transition really slow, because then you're doing like a negative push-up, which will make you stronger in the long run. So I don't want you to rush through any of the transitions. You really just want to focus on what you're doing and focus on maintaining integrity in the shapes. If you have to regress, don't worry. Rather regress than have do the practice with poor form, because that's how you either injure yourself or you miss important details. Okay, and then you're going to advance and then miss a bunch of steps. Let's work a little bit on our spinal undulations. Okay, so we're going to come back to the rolling vinyasa, because the cobra roll is going to complete our rolling vinyasa. But first, before we get to the cobra roll, I want to take you through spinal undulations, what those mean, why we do them, because once you understand the spinal undulations, it will also help you with the cobra roll. Okay, so spinal undulations we use in section 1, particularly when in section 1 is called awakening. So that's basically where you are awakening the warrior within yourself, because we all have a warrior that fights and taps into a little bit of aggression within us, as well as the yogi, where we have to practice acceptance, accepting what is and what might never happen, and just being more present. And these spinal undulations, sort of like a wave or a snake shedding its skin, and just practicing being more fluid and accepting. And so that is the narrative behind it, but what it actually does for us physically is also amazing. Spinal undulations, they help us to really work into the soft tissue and the connective tissue between the joints and the muscles. Particularly gets us to gain more body or mind-body connection between through the whole spine, and really integrates our lower part of our body with the upper part of our body, and particularly in the thoracic. So that's like from this point up. Usually people, if they haven't been practicing some sort of movement, they find it difficult to find an opening within the upper body, and I really feel like spinal undulations help us to gain that sensation and that feeling of being fluid in your thoracic spine. So how that looks is, so we go from a forward fold, okay? So you can find the forward fold. We really encourage you in your forward fold to not straighten the legs completely. What you want is a slight bend in the knees. It's also a little bit more athletic, and you can do more from a bended stance as opposed to just stretching out the back line here, which obviously you're going for a stretch, that's cool, but you won't be able to do much from that positioning. So you will find a bend in the knees, and you really want to find the connection between the rib cage and the quads. You want to try hug everything in so that you find a nice connection here, because the purpose of spinal undulations is to find a connection within your body. So we forward folding to find our spinal undulations. You're going to tuck, just like our rolling weight, you're going to tuck your chin towards the chest. You're going to find, so here we're in like a slight anterior tilt. You want to find that posterior tilt by hugging or drawing the pelvis in towards the rib cage again, just like the rolling wave, okay? Navel draws to the spine, chin draws to the chest, and we're going to roll up, sort of like our cobra hood here. Imagine you pressing into the ground, but you want to be soft about this. You don't want to be too tense. You want to have a certain softness or fluidity in this movement. So we're rolling up until we get to about a halfway point. As we are rolling up, our hands are going to lightly brush the tops of our quads, so just above the knees. And in the beginning, you can use your hands to help assist you to move through the movement. Okay? So you want to have them on top of your quads. And we're in this little rounded position. Okay? Now, we're going to find a halfway lift. So, we're going to retract the shoulder blades, so draw and depress them. So draw the shoulders away from the ears. Our chin is going to lift slightly, so almost like the tops of your mat, okay? And you're going to press the chest towards the ground, finding a nice retraction in the back, so finding a flat back. So you've now moved from your pelvis, from a posterior tilt to a slight anterior tilt, finding a nice flat back. And if you want, because your knees would be bended here, you can actually straighten them out a little bit more if you want to get more of like a hamstring or back line stretch. But just make sure that when you find your halfway lift, you're still engaging the abdominals. So you're drawing the navel in towards the spine. Okay, you don't want to be arching in the back, and you don't want to be deactivating your abdominals, because that is what is supporting the strength and the fire in your body, okay? Supporting your lumbar back, your lumbar spine. Okay, so we're coming, we're rolling. So it looks something like this. Let me just show you. Coming to a halfway lift, gaze forward, and then from here we're going to lower back down gently. Hands, fingertips lightly brush the legs, and just melt back into your forward fold. And we're going to repeat that. Coming up, gaze forward, flat back, keeping a flat back, and as you get that connection by the rib cage and the quadriceps, as you feel it touching here, there shouldn't be any space. You can melt the chest back down into a forward fold, and we would roll through this about 3 times, really maintaining that tuck with the chin, and then And then after the third one, you can even bring your hands to your calves or behind your knees or ankles and just pull yourself a little bit closer and deeper into your forward fold. And then rise up, rolling through. And this time, instead of a halfway lift, we're going to maintain that posterior tilt, maintain that front line activation. Our overhead, we're going to rise all the way to standing, to Tadasana. We're going to roll the shoulders back, depress the shoulders away from the ears, rise into standing mountain pose. This is a really amazing transition because it helps connect the body. It helps you to establish a really nice integration of fluidity into your practice. And as I said, it really helps us work into the soft tissue, into parts where we usually get a little bit stiff and disconnected from our, particularly the thoracic upper part of our bodies. And it, you can flow through this as much as you like, but it just helps you to integrate that nicely and to get more of a feeling for fluid movements in your practice. Okay, so that is our spinal undulations. And then what I showed you there is from a forward, so we go from a forward fold, making sure you're bending the knees, rising through our spinal undulations to a halfway point, and instead of just going from here to here to here, we're a little less stiff and more fluid. We're transitioning with bent knees, finding a nice connection between the quads and the rib cage, and we're flowing from that forward fold into a halfway lift, and then lowering back down to where we came from. In your rolling vinyasa, remember, you will be doing, this is a transition you really want to practice and master, because you will be going through this transition a lot during all 7 sections. Well, particularly all 7 sections. Okay, so as I mentioned, we begin the wave, okay? We come through our rolling wave, and then obviously if you need to regress, you can also drop the knees, okay? So your plank shift, the shoulders past the fingertips, lift your gaze, elbows stay nice and close to the ribcage, bring the navel to the spine, not dropping, not arching your back, keeping a nice neutral spine, lowering down slowly to chaturanga, all the way down until your belly meets the ground, into your prone. Now we're going to work on cobra roll. So first, look at what a cobra roll looks like. Okay, so we're in our prone. Our toes are tucked underneath right now because we came from chaturanga. Okay, always knowing where you came from is important. Our gaze is forward. Our chin is on the ground. Okay, this is a really great transition because it connects you with earth, and it just really reminds us of where we came from and where we're going. Akify is really good grounding exercise transition. Okay, so the cobra roll is like a thing of a snake. Okay, so you want to draw the shoulders away from the ears, retracting them, depressing them. You're going to, now with the toes curled under, you're going to find an anterior pelvic tilt in your lumbar spine. So to do that, we're going to give ourselves a little push with the toes. See, with the toes I can push myself forward. You just want to shift your knees forward. Okay, so I'm just pressing the toes and pushing my knees forward, finding an anterior pelvic tilt. Okay, so basically your bum is up towards the sky. Okay, it will feel a little bit awkward, but it's something to, I suppose, give you a little bit of a laugh. Alright, once you've got that anterior pelvic tilt, I am drawing the navel to the spine, okay, so keeping that nice front line activation. Then from those tucked toes, I am flipping the toes down, flattening onto the tops of the feet, okay? And you're now drawing the navel to the spine, okay? You're going to now find a posterior pelvic tilt. So we're going to draw the hips in towards the rib cage, but my chin is still on the ground. Alright, so this part will require a little bit of upper body strength. I'm going to offer a regression to those that do not have upper body strength to do this yet, because it's kind of like a push-up in a way. So yeah, so you want to find from the anterior pelvic tilt, you want to find that posterior pelvic tilt, drawing the pelvis to the rib cage, navel to the spine, hugging everything in. So you'll see that even here I'm actually pressing into my fingertips slightly, okay, and I'm hugging everything in. And you can just reverse this and practice just this motion of going from anterior to posterior and just finding that nice activation. If I was to do it standing here, I've got an anterior pelvic tilt, my chin is here, and I'm finding that posterior, and it's a front line hugging. So you're finding that hugging positioning from anterior to posterior, okay? So the key here, so what that looks like is to maintain that positioning throughout. So I'm going to shift the knees, okay? You're going to find posterior, so really pressing the pelvis towards the rib cage. And then from here, the most important part is to draw the chin towards the chest. Okay? So drawing the chin towards the chest, you're going to press up. See, this is where you need a bit of upper body strength. And you're going to keep the chin towards the chest. The hips are not going to shift up with you. You're going to keep the hips on the ground. So as you hear, you're drawing the pelvis in and you're squeezing the glutes, keeping the hips on the ground, lifting up, chin to the chest, finding the cobra root, rounding through the top of the spine, the thoracic and the cervical spine. And you're going to roll the shoulders back, gaze forward, finding a floating upward facing dog. Okay, so you'll see here that my knees are lifted off the ground, squeezing my quads, relaxing the glutes. The difference there is that I'm actually, you'll see because we flipped from curled toes to onto the tops of our feet, I'm now on the tops of my feet. Okay. Once we are in our upward floating upward dog, we can then complete our rolling vinyasa by tucking the chin towards the chest, firing into our cobra, pressing into the fingertips, tucking the chin, and rolling all the way back into our rolling wave. We're now on the tops of the feet, so stay on the tops of your feet as far as you can go, okay? And then when you get to the edge, you're going to flip one foot over at a time, like someone's pulling your tailbone up towards the sky, lowering back down into a downward facing dog. So that would be one complete rolling vinyasa. So you would go from your downward dog through your rolling wave, shifting past the fingertips, lowering down slowly to chaturanga to prone, into your cobra roll, rising into your floating upward dog. Once you're floating upward dog, you're going to reverse your wave. Chin draws against the chest, firing into the cobra head, and rolling back through into a downward facing dog. If you don't have the strength, so when you get to, so if you find a good way to test this is obviously if you do like the normal push-up, as I mentioned earlier, and you're arching your back and falling everywhere, or if you're just getting to the point where you're here on the tops of your feet, your posterior tilting, if you get to this point and you're relaxing down, then what I'd like you to do is just practice on your knees first, especially the cobra roll. Just practice regressing through the knees. So start in a child's pose. Okay? You're gonna find, so in a child's pose, you're kind of in a small anterior pelvic tilt. You want to find that posterior pelvic tilt through the hips. Okay? So you want to find that hugging by bringing the posterior tilt, so drawing the pelvis to the ribcage, rolling through your wave. Okay? And then you'll be in, then from here, you're going to shift shoulders past the fingertips. You're going to lower down. And then your anterior pelvic tilt. You can draw your hips in. And you just want to stay really close to the ground, okay? Connected to the ground with the knees on the ground still, okay? And then just keep your hips. So instead of floating them, you want to keep them on the ground. You can rise up into an upward facing dog. Roll the shoulders back. Press up and away into upward facing dog. And then you can then reverse this by taking your chin towards the chest, dropping the knees on the ground again, and rolling back into your rolling wave, back to find your child's pose. You can just work through that transition and just regress when you need to, and that will just really help you to build up your overall strength, as well as I also recommend practicing some push-ups, just normal conventional push-ups, some calisthenics work that will get you where you need to be quite quickly. The rolling lunge. So rolling lunge is a really important transition to understand, because we do that in almost every section. Alright, so, and it is basically what takes us transition to transition. Okay, and it's quite a good one because it builds alignment in your body, especially in the hips. It also helps with hamstring flexibility and gaining control over our toes and our feet. We step the feet together from our downward dog. Okay. We rise with the right foot up towards the sky. With the rolling lunge, you want to demi-point the foot. So that is like when you point the foot, and you point the toes down towards the ground so that the ball of your foot is pointing towards the front. So it's if, imagine you're going to kick someone, or you're going to kick somebody, like in martial arts, a good striking kick, you would kick with the ball of your foot. Alright, so, and that's really good for front line and back line activation in the legs. Okay, so rising with a demi point, you want to keep your hips neutral. So I don't want you to start opening up through the hips or overextend the leg to a point where you break the integrity in your alignment. You want to keep a nice, strong, aligned, parallel to the ground stance, keeping the hips parallel. Okay, so if you don't have the flexibility to get your leg all the way up without maintaining integrity, then just keep the foot lower. Okay, you're going to build a lot more strength that way, as opposed to just being so open that you're not really building up any kind of strength or control over the body. Okay, so you're going to lift. Fold the heel to the sits bones, rise onto the ball of the foot. You're going to find that rolling wave, okay? So posterior tilt, drawing the navel to the spine, firing into the cobra hook, drawing the knee all the way in towards the chest, chin draws to the chest. And you're going to hug the knee all the way up to the chest, okay? Nice and strong. I'm still hovering my right foot and then pointing. And then when you get to your edge, you're going to lower the foot onto the ground, finding a low lunge. Okay, and then to reverse that, you're going to press back into the cobra hook, so pushing into the fingertips, cobra hook fires. You're going to recoil the heel to the sits bones, so elevate the heel, recoil, cobra hook, press back through the fingertips, all the way back, extend the leg, finding a neutral pelvis, lowering the heel down, lowering the right leg back into a downward facing dog. The other side, I'm just going to show you on the other side. So, bring the leg up, rising the ball of the foot, holding the heel to the sit bones, drawing the knee all the way up through the rolling way, hugging towards the chest, chin to the chest, parietal cover the navel to spine, shifting forward, lower, the foot down, to the ground, just the hands if needed. Okay, that's a really important cue here, finding your low lunge. What I mean by that is some people will awkwardly sort of plonk their foot down onto the ground, but they're not really going to their edge. Okay. I also at the same time don't want you to go past your edge. So, for example, if you are getting to this point, but you cannot go any further, okay, and you're hugging your knee up towards the chest, and you have to place your foot there because you don't have the range to go further, that's fine. Place it down, and then you can always adjust the hands if needed. But I do encourage you to always go to the edge. Okay, the edge of edge meaning not painful, but you are challenging yourself. Okay, so rising onto the ball of the foot, holding the heel to the sits bones, drawing the knee to the chest, leaning forward, hugging the knee up, and I'm shifting my gaze slightly forward, towards the fingertips. I then place my foot gently, I don't drop it. Okay, with control, I find my low lunge. To reverse that, I push back into my fingertips, recoil the heel to the sits bones, over it, rolling away, extend the leg back, neutral pelvis, so not opening up through the hips, and lowering back down, finding a downward facing dog. That is our rolling lunge, okay? That's a really good one to just practice to build up your strength and endurance. The last cue I'd like to point out with that one is that is basically like your entry into a handstand. So think of it as practicing for a handstand. So if you are in downward facing dog, and I extend my left leg up and I'm open my hips, and now I try to pick up into a handstand, you're going to be opening up way too much and losing the integrity in entering your handstand. So you won't have a nice controlled straight handstand.